background still there?
Yeah, yeah, you can start with your announcements, absolutely.
All right, I want to call the Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. Today's meeting was not posted 48 hours in advance, and that we could not have reasonably known the topics of discussion 48 hours prior to this meeting. That the topics to be discussed are essentially essential since they deal with a public health emergency, and the board could not wait for posting for 48 hours in advance for this meeting. The meeting is being held virtually through Zoom. People that join this meeting are set so the microphones are muted. So that the meeting can occur in an orderly fashion, we ask people who join the meeting to mute their microphones so background noises do not interfere. And to let everyone know, the situation we're talking about has to do with Life Care Center in Littleton. And it's a fluid situation, so we're going to go get an update from all the boards. I want to turn it over to Louise Nichols right now so she can open her meeting and make a statement.
Hello, everyone. So the board, this is also a combined Board of Health meeting, and I would just like to say that the words that Joe Knox has repeated, this is an emergency meeting and we're not able to notify. So we are also covered under this meeting as the Board of Health.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you. At this point, too, I don't know whether I mentioned it, but since what's occurring at Life Care Center is an ongoing situation and we're being updated all the time. Right now, we won't be taking questions from the public. And Nina, do you want to start off by giving us a background of our emergency director?
Yes, could we actually just do something logistically for a moment? And I think there's so many people on this call, I'm not sure that we have enough information to know which of these telephone numbers may be public officials. So we're actually going to ask if every member of the maybe Board of Health could identify themselves and one by one so that we can make sure that your microphones are unmuted. I'll start with Gino because I know, Gino, you're there, but you may be a telephone number and we're not sure which one you are.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say that. I didn't realize we're going to have a meeting today. I happen to be on North Shore. I'm on my car. I'm going to be here until the meeting is over. So I'm running my air conditioner because it's so warm. Nevertheless, I couldn't get on Zoom, but anyway, I got on telephone. If at least you know that I'm here.
That's great. Thank you, Gino. I know we have Louise. I see Mike. I saw Kevin. I thought I saw Kevin somewhere. Yeah. And is Lisa somewhere?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, so great. We have all the Board of Health members. We have Senator Eldridge. We have Jocelyn. Hey, Jocelyn, is Emily on the line?
No, so unfortunately, Emily couldn't join us today.
Okay, no problem. I know we have all of our Board of Selectmen members. We have Tom Harrington. We have Chief Wodzinski. We have Chip Kennard, Jim Gareffi. I think everyone else should be muted. And if there is somebody before we mute you that I've missed that was specifically asked to join this meeting, of course, the public is always welcome. But if there was another town official that I have missed, please speak up now before we mute you.
Emergency Board of Health meeting about life care. Yeah.
So just let me know when you feel like we've gotten to a point where we've muted the members of the public who are here to listen in.
The one thing is that for Gino, what's the last four numbers of your cell phone number so I can rename you?
Oh, somebody don't remember my name. It's a 7367.
I think it's 1194, Joe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I thought you meant the number that to get into it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Gino.
1194.
Hey, Lauren.
Thank you.
Lauren, how do I change my name to my number?
Unfortunately, Joe Layden is the only person who can do this on his end, so thank you everyone for your patience as we go through this process to make sure that we eliminate as much background noise as possible and also have the flexibility and members have the ability to speak freely on their side.
Nina, I want to take an opportunity to thank all our emergency people who have been working on this for over a week now, especially the fire department and the chief. This ongoing situation, we just want to get an update on everything that has occurred, what might have been done today, and what our steps will be coming up to try to resolve this issue that we have with Life Care Center. So do we want to turn it over to Jim Griffey? Do you want to turn it over to the chief?
I would leave it up to both of them to handle it because I think both of them are the best to give the updates, and I would ask them to just coordinate with one another.
I would say if Jim doesn't mind starting it off, that might be a good idea.
Okay. All right, Scott. So the Board of Health is kind of in this because we have a role as preventing the spread of disease and doing disease surveillance for the town of Littleton. So we've been working with Life Care since last weekend when I think Scott mentioned or called us, and we got a report of, I think, the first case at the facility. So we had a meeting with Life Care on Sunday morning. We had a meeting with Life Care, these are by phone, on Monday afternoon. And we've been trying to work to get to the bottom of what's happening at the facility. We also get reports for those people who test positive at the facility by way of our public health nurse. And when we weren't getting enough information to allow us to do our job, I submitted a letter of concern to the Bureau of Healthcare Safety and Quality. I believe it's the agency that actually licenses the facility, to see if they could intercede on our behalf to get the facility to provide us with some more information. Again, they weren't being forthcoming with information. I think by Wednesday we started getting calls. I'm sure the town hall was getting calls. I know I was getting calls from families regarding the situation at the facility or their inability to get information about their family that's in the facilities. I've talked to a number of people on the phone about that. I've also spoken with, again, the Bureau of Healthcare Safety and Quality about families' inability to get information from the facilities, and have actually started recommending that they file a complaint with that department. I got a call from Scott this morning that there was some word that people were being moved out of the facility. In the calls that I had taken, there was one family yesterday, or it was the day before, who mentioned the facility asked them to come take their family member out of the facility. They didn't. The family member, I believe, is still there. Our concern with having people moved out of the facility, as I expressed to Nina and to Scott, was that, we've had a whole bunch of people who have been swabbed for testing. We don't know their current COVID status. So we were concerned about those people getting put into the community without us knowing anything about them. So this morning I drafted an order and provided it for town council to review, to order the facility not to release people unless it was medically necessary until tests came back and the facility had a plan for appropriate treatment and relocation of those folks. And also was on the phone with the Bureau of Healthcare Safety and Quality, explaining what the actions I was recommending to the Board of Health to do. She had the Life Care facility give us a call, and I explained to that person, her name was Kate O'Connor, she's a regional person for Life Care, that the conversation needed to be broader than just with me. So we did have that conversation. We were able to hash out our concerns, the Board of Health concerns. And so what I did at the end of that phone call was to put together a list of expectations that the Board of Health would have not to issue the order. I've drafted that list of expectations. I've run it by my public health nurse to make sure that we're on the right track. And so here we are.
I think as far as, emergency services are concerned, having some contact with the National Guard and being made aware of some of the situations, it was really our priority to get in touch with the Board of Health and, at least establish that or try to figure out which direction we needed to head after finding out that information this morning. I'm pretty satisfied at this point. At least it seems to be there's a it seems like we, formed up that chain of communications with our call with that facility today. It sounds like there's definitely a solid plan between them and the Neshoba Board of Health for the to the health agent. And I think, this is a huge step in at least having regular communications, daily communications as far as patient status and just establishing that regular link. It's definitely, I feel that's going to be very beneficial.
So
Scott, can I ask a question real quick? You talk about a regular link. What does that look like going forward in terms of communicating with them over the next few weeks?
So at this point, if this is Jim Gareffi, if I can jump in, at this point, we have drafted the kind of the process to have the facility call our public health nurse by the end of the day, so she can get an update on the facility.
And that's regardless of positive tests or anything like that. That's just a daily check-in.
Yes, it is. And again, in the list of things we want them to do, if anything that comes up that's urgent, both happening within the facility or something that may affect outside the facility, whether it's staff that may live in other communities or patients being released to the communities, to let public health nurse know. We've also asked as part of that, that the Board of Health is called and we review with the nurses at that facility anybody who's being released before they're released.
Jim Gareffi, it's Louise. Can you just talk a little bit about yesterday, the testing that went on? I know that the residents were tested, but what about the staff?
At this point here, the staff were not tested, and depending on who you talk to,
someone's talking to the director about it.
So depending on who you talk to, the facility said the National Guard said they weren't allowed to test the staff members. I got a text from a staff member with an email with a text from Life Care that essentially states that it was only residents being tested and staff. They may test staff at another time.
Well, how do we enforce that testing?
So, to my knowledge, there's no requirement for them to get tested.
Okay.
I know that in one case, I have a close friend that works there. He asked a question right to the director, am I going to be tested? And was told no, they weren't being tested because the governor said only to do the patients. So I don't know where that came from, where the governor would ever make a statement like that.
Well, that's what Kate from the Life Care facility, she mentioned that same kind of thing, that the governor, they were told that only the residents were being tested. So part of the issue with testing is, testing of asymptomatic people doesn't happen on a regular basis because the test isn't always as accurate if you're showing no symptoms. So there's some of that coming into it. If a staff member had symptoms, they can certainly talk with their healthcare provider and request to be tested.
Jim, I'm glad you raised that point because I wanted to understand what it would look like in terms of allowing people to be discharged from the facility if they had a single negative test. How reliable is that? And what is so one question is reliability of that. Second question is, what does the communication look like when someone is discharged from this facility, even if they have a negative test?
So I'm not sure to my knowledge, is not a requirement that they have a negative test before they get discharged. It's that we know what the test results are so that the appropriate discharge can occur. If you go and get a test because your doctor's referred you to do that, typically while the test is pending, they tell you to go home and kind of keep separate for a bit until you get the test results. But once you get the results, what ends up happening is a public health nurse generally will give you a call and go kind of explain to you the process of isolation as the state requires it. and then she'll make a determination of who your close contacts were, so that you can contact those individuals to explain to them that there's a requirement that they quarantine because they've had exposure to a person who was infected. That's the role that the Board of Health is playing in this, and that's why we really need to know when people are being discharged, their status, essentially.
And does that expectation of isolation carry for people who test negative as well?
No.
Even though they're coming out of a facility where there are, at this point, what, 10 to 12 people who have tested positive?
So part of the contact tracing that we do, so again, anyone who tests positive, our nurse is going to be contacting that person to get a list of the close contacts. If one of those persons who wasn't tested was a close contact, they may be required to quarantine. There's slightly different rationale or protocol for healthcare workers because the state recognizes that there's a shortage of healthcare workers. So our public health nurse will go through that with the facility to determine who's a who's a healthcare person and the patients or the residents.
So Jim, this is Chuck DeCoste. So we really don't have a leg to stand on for mandating that all staff get tested. And that's staff that actually go back to the facility. There's a number of staff that are not going back. My understanding from some folks that I know in there that an additional 2 employees didn't even go back to work today. So as far as what the governor's looking for with traceability, those folks in all likelihood have been in contact with somebody with COVID. And are those names being shared with you, folks that are no longer employed there? If they had walked out, and in one case, I've heard that one employee was terminated.
So again, we would need to have that information so we could contact the facility and check with that facility on those persons.
Okay, I'll share whatever information I have with you and Board of Health.
Sure, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And another question, Jim, sorry to keep throwing stuff at you. What's the role of the local Board of Health versus the DPH to track folks and how is that working? How is that interface? Where does our responsibility end and where is the DPH supposed to be picking up the tracing elements of this?
So we both use the state's or DPH's disease surveillance system, MAVEN. So when lab reported cases go into the system, the state epidemiologists can review them. They're assigned to Littleton because the facility's in Littleton. If somebody who works at the facility lives in an adjoining town, that report, that test results actually goes to that other community. So that's how we end up seeing it. We work to do that case contacting and that follow-up with the infected individual. We also work directly with Department of Public Health Epidemiology Department. If we have any questions, they've already created this as a cluster so that they can have all these cases together so they can see it as essentially one event that's being worked on.
This is Mike Zeldin. Jim, we're still blind because the amount of testing that can be carried out is well below the standard for these kinds of situations. So the mere fact of testing is helpful but not determinative. Jim, could you find out, or can you find out from the State's Board of Health on their experience in the population of how many, shall we say, false negatives are coming back since they've been, I think they have well over 40,000 people tested in Massachusetts, and by now they should have a pretty good idea of the false negatives, especially if they're using the RNA-based test, which is fraught, which does have issues with it, depending on the source. The second is that I am not so sure the governor mandated that employees who work in senior centers and other related facilities should, quote, not be tested. If that's the case, then the shortage of testing is even more severe than folks might realize. So we're still flying blind. And I think that it should be reiterated that people who work at the staff who work at these facilities, not infrequently, but frequently have other jobs at similar facilities around the state, and they should be tested. So I think that we ought to do a little bit more digging around, maybe through our elected officials, of this notion that staff of senior centers where a hotspot looks like it has erupted, they need to be tested and traced, because this could accelerate the spread in whatever community or communities the staff or the patients live. I mean, I think all of this is obvious to everyone here.
I will check on that question about the false negatives and see what I can get for you.
Well, more than that, I'd like to have, is it a fact that the governor has mandated or has ordered that staff at a facility like this should not be tested, that only patients?
Okay.
Yeah.
And if they are using the RNA test, be prepared for a high false negative, especially in the hands of people who are doing it rapidly.
Mike, can I just add to your comment? I feel that the testing of the staff members is, may almost be more important than the testing of the patients at this point.
Correct.
Joe, if I may. Please. I can't see you, but so it's my understanding that the state issued state regulations and requirements for nursing home facilities and facilities like Life Care Center on how to deal with the COVID-19 epidemic. And I saw that mentioned during one of the governor's press conferences. So it would be interesting to know what the Life Care Center has done to follow these requirements, especially with respect to communicating with staff, warning them about, the dangers of coming in contact with a person possibly infected, what they should do. I mean, we all know what we're supposed to do if we come in contact with someone who potentially has or has been diagnosed with COVID-19. I would hope that all the staff members there would be aware of that. And to Chuck's point, our hands are tied at our level. We can't mandate that the staff be tested, which is really frustrating for us. So I know Scott had mentioned that communication has been improved with the administrators at the Life Care Center. I'd like to ask them that question specifically. What steps have they taken? If they're not going to test their employees, at least giving them the information and tools available to make them aware of the symptoms and what they should do if they feel symptomatic, or advising them that they should reach out to their personal health care providers.
So if I can just kind of pipe in on that, based on our call this morning, this is Jim Gareffi. Based on our call this morning, the facility seems to be following the DPH guidelines that you're talking about. They're issued April 2nd. They're actually revised guidelines. Essentially what it is revised guidelines for allowing asymptomatic healthcare professionals and emergency medical technicians to work following a known exposure. So this is guidelines that to try to protect both the employee from potential exposures and balance the need to have those folks in facilities. And again, on our call this morning, the regional director, Kate, or Vice President Kate, kind of went through the list of things they're doing, which seems to match up with that. In our conversation, we're going to send and make sure that Life Care Facility has those updated guidances and that they're following those updated guidances.
Okay, thanks.
What does ensuring compliance look like, Jim? I appreciate that we've got people saying the right things. How do we know that they're doing the right things? Because I'm not sure that history is on their side here.
And that's where I'm trying to lean really heavy on the state licensing board. The local Board of Health doesn't have any licensing capability in there. We have this really blunt tool called the emergency order, which we were prepared to use this morning. And again, our role is education, try to get them to do that. When we're done this conversation, this set of discussion that we had this morning will also be copied to Elaine McHale at the Bureau of Healthcare Safety and Quality. so she's aware of what we're doing. So hopefully we can get some assistance from them to make sure that's happening at the facility.
So right now from this, I've got essentially 4 action items that we're pursuing. Daily check-ins, collectively pursuing some means of getting staff testing done and that may require pursuing it at all levels of government, including with our state and federal reps. Contact tracing, which the Board of Health is actively doing, and then interfacing with the licensing authority to ensure that they're actually following through on what they say they're doing. What other action items do we have here?
Louise, maybe if we check with town council, we may be able to issue a written order for them to actually get the testing done on the staff and get that into place.
That'd be a good idea.
This is Tom Harrington. Kevin, that's beyond the authority of the Board of Health to require testing. I think we need to lean on the Department of Public Health to take those actions.
I got it. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
And so what does leaning on the Department of Public Health look like? Who's doing that leaning and how are we doing it?
I've spoken with them every day this week, and Tamara talks to the EPI if she has questions about the lab reports that get submitted.
And we've been in regular communication with their legal department.
Tom, this is Mike Selden. Who in fact has the authority, if anyone in the state, to require on an emergency basis testing of patients and staff?
The state may be able to exercise that authority. The town cannot exercise that authority without a court order.
Got it.
Tom, would it be possible to take a look into 105 CMR 300.200 to see what steps the Board of Health could take in order to be a little bit more proactive and not rely on anyone above to make these decisions for our town?
Sure.
Is there anything I can do to help?
Kevin, if you believe that the authority exists and want to send me the statutory or regulatory references for me to check, I'd be happy to look and review.
I'll forward that now. Thank you.
We have discussed that before in our meetings, and have decided that it's not something that we can do or that the town can enforce.
Right. Yep. That is true. That is true.
Let's let the legal experts tell us.
It seems to me, this is Chuck again, it seems to me that DPH is where the muscle lies. So I think we need to keep our pressure on DPH. And, whether that, I'm not sure if that's from the Board of Health, Board of Selectmen, our Board of Health agent, all of the above, town council, maybe stick Gino on them. I think that we need to make sure that we've got constant pressure. They're dealing with a lot. And although, this is very much in the news and at the forefront, we need to make sure that nobody's losing sight of this. And, whether we, as a result of this meeting here right now, we determine who that point person or who that the lead person will be. Maybe that's one of the objectives we can have from this call, but we need to make sure that DPH hears us and understands what we want as actions and try to make that happen.
Right. So Chuck, in response to your comment, the Board of Selectmen, Paul and I are currently working on a letter to the DPH, and Congresswoman Trahan has reached out to us, to the board, to join in with us on that letter, and certainly going to invite Representative Arcero and Senator Eldridge as well to join with us on that letter to the Department of Public Health, urging them to address this situation. So that letter we anticipate will be finalized and sent by Monday.
Excellent. Thanks, Cindy.
Of course, you had a fairly complete draft this morning, but facts change so quickly. I'm sure you have stuff to add to it now.
Right.
Representative Arcero, do you have any comments?
I don't know if he was able to make it on the line.
Senator Eldridge, I believe, is on the call.
He is, yep.
Senator Eldridge?
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, no, thank you to Nita for reaching out, and it sounds like DPH has been responsive, but with respect to the letter, that sounds like the board or boards are drafting, happy to follow up with the DPH. I believe that Jim Arciero was in touch with the DPH this morning, and we're in close touch, so I can follow up with them today. Once I get a copy of the letter, and just with respect to the testing of staff, I don't think there's a state guideline about testing healthcare staff per se, but I can take a closer look at that as well.
Great, and we do have Jocelyn DeLeon on the call as well, representing Congresswoman Trahan's office. I don't know if you have any comments, Jocelyn.
No, if anything, I'll just add as well that our office is in pretty close contact with the governor's office as well, daily check-ins, and this is what's going on at Life Care Center is definitely kind of priority. As far as questions involving their office, we're happy to reach out to them.
Thank you. That's good. Yeah.
Anything else you want to go over right now?
Hey guys, I guess I have a question. Any more involvement with the National Guard, or was it just the one-day trip that they took over there yesterday?
Chief, are you there?
Just unmuting. In my discussion with them, they were going in for one day to test all of the patients. I heard from staff on site that from Life Care staff that if they wanted Life Care staff tested, that the Guard may be able to come back on another day. Really unclear on that.
Chief, just going to jump in here since you're on the screen. Just relative to the staff at Life Care, they are just like when your folks respond to a call there, your folks are taking every precaution, full PPE, full Tyvek suits, masks, breathing mask, as well as a face shield and goggles and gloves and whatnot. I assume, and it's simply an assumption, I'm asking for your maybe an answer here if you can help me get some clarity. Their staff that ends up going home at the end of the day, that's dealing with some folks that have been tested positive, they're going home. They're undergoing the same precautions when they enter a room as your folks are when they enter the facility?
So I personally have not been inside the facility, but when patients are transferred, when our ambulance goes to pick them up, one of our members goes in, like you said, in full PPE.
Mm-hmm.
The staff assist our member at transferring the patient onto the stretcher, and typically the staff, that staff person will come out with our member, and that individual who comes out does have the same thing. They have the gown, the gloves, the glasses, the N95 mask. So that's what I've personally witnessed. So they do have full PPE when they come out with our staff to assist loading the patient into the ambulance.
So we have to assume that their protocol would be for when that staff member goes back inside, they're fully decontaminating, and if they have to go in and help another patient, they're going to PPE up once again with clean everything. And when they go home, they're decontaminating. And if they've been in contact with a positive patient, it's my understanding that if you're in contact with a positive patient, even if you're covered with PPE, for the staff, I mean, what's the protocol for the staff if they go home and they've been exposed? Are they subject to a 14-day quarantine? Or I know that you guys have the process in place where you guys are fully covered and you do a full decon when you get back to the station, including the equipment that was used.
That's correct.
I guess just looking for some clarity there, and I think it'll assuage some of the concerns of the public as well.
Sorry, 1 second.
Yep.
Sorry about that. So speaking for our staff, when we wear our full PPE, we get to the hospital, we decon, we have a procedure for removing all of our PPE. We have a procedure for deconning our ambulance back at the station. Our members change out their uniform, they shower, they change. Full change out of everything.
Right.
We are doing everything that we can do and ensure the safety and protection of our members. As far as the staff, unfortunately, I can't assume anything, and I don't know what the procedures are for the facility. You have to, being on the outside and not seeing, I honestly cannot speak for them, and I can only have the assumption that they are following the same guidelines, constantly washing your hands. According to the CDC, as long as you take full procedure, full PPE, and you follow those procedures, you are not considered an exposure. And as long as you do that, you wash, soap and water, hand sanitizer, everything, you are not considered an exposure.
Okay.
So, and knowing that, and again, it's difficult, but I'm in a position, I think all of us in EMS and the fire department are in the position where we have to assume that they are adhering to that before they leave the facility to go home every day.
Well, and Chief, I guess that's why my last action item there was pursuing inspections by the licensing authority or whoever is statutorily allowed to get in there and verify this. We're not talking about a hospital where there are a lot of eyes on it, and that's one of my concerns here.
Right, and I think, and honestly, that's really where the Board of Health and DPH, that's over our head, and the Board of Health and DPH are really those authorities that can step in there to monitor that.
If I could add, this is Jamie Eldridge, is that what I've heard earlier today from a constituent of mine who is a family member who works at the Life Care Center, and not even a nurse, but works in another part of the Life Care Center, is that there's really only around 8 employees there taking care of everyone. And some of the people there are not nurses at all. They're not, qualified necessarily to take care of patients. So I do think to Chief Wodzinski's suggestion about getting the licensing board to get in there to see who's actually doing the work and whether they're qualified, because I'm very concerned that the people in there, don't necessarily have the qualifications to take care of residents, and that's very concerning.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That really is, the Board of Health and DPH. This is at that level, and we can only urge that they step in to ensure the proper things are being done.
So from the Board of Health standpoint, we don't necessarily have the regulatory ability to be in there, but I have been pressing that Bureau of Healthcare Quality and Safety to get in there and give us some information about the facility, because we don't know what's happening on the inside. They have surveyors that I assume go out and do inspections before they license or as part of licensing. It really would be important for them to get in the facility and make sure that all the proper procedures are being followed in that facility.
That's further reason that we need to, and I guess we're all in agreement on this point, get these specific points in writing to DPH so later on they can't claim deniability or misunderstood this or whatever else. They're more likely to act quicker and more efficiently if they know there's a paper trail.
This is Mike. How long and what would it take for, under the current emergency, what would it take the local, shall we say, the town, to have the authority to go in and make inspections? Is that at the legislative level, or is that executive level, or none of the above?
Legislative level.
So this is Tom Harrington.
Thank you, Tom.
We currently are not authorized. So either the state needs to authorize us to do it, or a court needs to authorize us to do it. And as we sit here today, I think the likelihood that a court is going to authorize us to take such action is extremely low. I think DPH has the authority here. They are the license granting authority, and so our time is best spent working with them and trying to get them to take these actions.
I wasn't suggesting we start a legislative trail with this. I just want to understand how this managed not to be in place on an emergency basis. Thank you.
And just if I may add, they're the ones who go in and are experienced in inspecting these facilities. They know the requirements for these facilities. So it's really, their role is important in this, making sure that the facilities are operating properly.
Yeah. And the other thing too, I just wanted to add with respect to obtaining a court order is a lot of the courts right now are closed. They're running on skeleton staff and limiting very much what matters are filed and come before them at this time. So to echo Tom's point, I think the most expeditious avenue we have at this point is to pursue it through the DPH.
So do I understand it correctly in terms of pursuing it, where the Board of Selectmen is sending a letter to the DPH, the Board of Health through Jim is working through his channels and contacts at DPH, and I guess Jamie and Jim and Congresswoman Trahan's office, to the extent that her office can help, we're leaning on our legislators to push from a third direction. Is that correct?
Yep. That is true.
Anything else? Nina or anything?
Just one question, Louise. When is the next regularly scheduled Board of Health meeting?
We have a meeting Wednesday, April 8th at 2 o'clock, but that is like a COVID meeting, and our regularly scheduled meeting is the 14th, but that is for our normal activities of the Board of Health.
Okay, that's helpful. To the Board of Selectmen, would the board like to have the idea could be that the more signatories on the letter, the better. You may want to consider having a joint letter signed by both Board of Selectmen and Board of Health.
I'm happy with whatever we can get out as quickly as possible.
Right.
I think doing it expeditiously trumps the number of signatures on it.
That's a good point. It might become difficult to have both boards sign.
Right. So we can have this letter ready from our meeting on Monday.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then the Board of Health is meeting when? Wednesday, Louise?
Right.
Wednesday.
Yeah. So then they can finalize their letter Wednesday.
Really quickly, if I can just add with regards to procedures and protocols, and I know we're all pushing on DPH from all different directions. At least our office has been informed that DPH is implementing or sending over an expert to kind of assist with protocol and procedure, just to make that known.
To Life Care Center?
Yes.
Thank you. Jocelyn, will they be giving a heads up to the Life Care Center, or is it an unannounced visit?
I'm not sure what the timeline is or presence. We've just been informed that DPH has decided that an expert is required to be there and guiding the work that they're doing if they continue functioning as a facility.
I'm not sure when, it's just that they are doing it.
But I can kind of check back in to kind of get a better idea of timeline and what that, really entails.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from any members of the boards?
No.
All right. Do we have a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Yep.
Second.
Roll call.
Did the board of selectmen have a second?
Second.
Okay.
I'll seconded it.
Okay.
I
Cindy?
second it first.
Aye.
Chuck?
Aye.
Chase?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye. Thank you so much.
Aye.
Very good
Louise,
information.
would you call a motion from your board?
Okay, so can I have a motion for the Board of Health to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I made a second, whatever.
That was for the Board of Selectmen, Gino. You're not on that yet.
Okay.
Mike, did you make a motion?
Yeah, yes, a motion for the Board of Health to adjourn.
I'll
Okay, I
second.
second, okay?
Kevin seconds, okay. All in favor?
Roll call. If you would,
Aye.
please.
Oh, roll call, sorry. So Gino?
Thank you so much for the meeting. Very instructive.
I think that's an aye.
I hope everything will go well.
Lisa?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay well, everybody.
Thanks.
Stay safe.
Yeah, stay well. We'll see you Wednesday.
Thank you, Joe, for coordinating this meeting. You did a fantastic job with the muting.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Joe.
Joe.
Thanks, Joey.
Thanks, Joe.